Hi everybody, my name is Nicole and I am a digital nomad. I'm also an avid world traveler. I've been to 51 countries across all of the continents minus Antarctica, and during my travels I've either done that as a digital nomad or just as a normal traveler. Now the reason I'm making this video is that I see a lot of things come up on my social media and I get a lot of ads targeted to me about, how to become a six-figure digital nomad. And I was just thinking, there's clearly a lot of people who want to do this, so I would just devote a little bit of time to putting this video together to show you how you can become a digital nomad regardless of your previous experience or your profession, and give you a few tips in that as well. Now this video will be a little bit longer than what I normally do. The reason being is there is a lot to cover, obviously. However, if you're already well on your way to becoming a digital nomad, you can skip to whichever section you think is relevant to you. I'll timestamp it. So I'm going to cover how to generate an income as a digital nomad, so how to get a remote job and how to freelance. I'm also going to go over essential equipment that you're probably going to need if you are going to embark on this journey. And I'm going to finish off with some useful tips for traveling and working as a digital nomad. First, I want to talk about how to find work. Now, obviously, this is so much easier now than it was pre-COVID. Working remote is so much more normalized than it used to be, and a lot of companies have figured out how to make remote work for their employees. Now, there's two different approaches you can go about this, depending on whether or not working as a digital nomad is your long-term or short-term goal. If it's your long-term goal, what I would recommend doing is looking at the remote jobs online and seeing which ones you can see yourself doing. Then obviously you can train to do them, maybe get some internships or junior positions, and eventually just build up your skill set and confidence so that you can do it fully remotely or at a freelance capacity. Of course, training for an entire new industry can take months, even years. And it's still something you can train to do as being a digital nomad. But if you're wanting to be a digital nomad straight away or, within the next few months, it might not be the best option for you. Instead, there are a few things you can do. And I will list these in order of easiness, and if one option doesn't apply to you, go to the next one. First thing I would do is I would just ask my boss, hey, can I work remote? I would also give them the benefits of doing that, for example, them saving office space, increasing productivity, and just see where that lands. Worst case scenario, they say no, and you're exactly where you started. Actually, worst case scenario, they take months to get back to you and then say no. Either way, at least you tried. The truth is, if you believe you can do your current job remotely, you probably can. You may have even previously done your job remotely during the pandemic. There's no reason you can't go back to that. You just need to let your boss see that. If you're still not quite getting there, you can also try negotiating with your boss. For example, maybe rather than you getting this pay rise this year or your end of year bonus, maybe you could negotiate remote working arrangements instead. Now let's say this didn't work. The next step I would take would be to find an employer that will let you work remote. So if you can do your exact same job for another company, the only difference is you can do it remote, of course apply for jobs in that role. There's so many companies out there that will be a bit more flexible, and you just need to find them and put yourself out there. At the moment, we're in a candidate-driven market, so a lot of employers will be willing to accommodate you purely to retain staff or to get you on board. Now moving on to the next step. Let's say if you have a job that you don't think can be done remote, that's absolutely fine. The chances are that you have skills that you've learned from that role that you can apply to a remote role. Me, for example, before I was a digital nomad, I worked in recruitment. And while there are a ton of remote recruitment jobs out there, the practicality of traveling and recruiting at the same time was not something that I really wanted to pursue. Obviously, it involves a lot of long hours. You've got to schedule a lot of meetings around your clients and candidates. And when you're in different time zones, it can be a bit nightmarish. I'm not saying it's impossible, but for what I wanted to do, where I wanted to travel, and the work-life balance I wanted for myself, it wasn't an option for me. So I looked at some of the skills that I had gained in recruitment, one of which being, I know exactly what recruiters are looking for. So I started by writing resumes. And I did this just by paying someone $100 to put a website together for me. I'd previously written resumes for friends, so I sent them the link to my website. They sent it to their friends. I also signed up to a resume building service where they were able to give me training, but they were also able to set me up with clients. And within about a month, I could already pick up as much or as little work as I wanted, and I could work from wherever in the world I wanted. I have since expanded from there. In fact, it's been a short while since I wrote a resume. I've kind of moved on to a lot of different things now instead, but that's how I got started. And that took me a couple weeks to really, hit the ground running with that. So look at what you're doing at the moment and seeing what skills you have. For example, maybe you work in a bar. Great, you already have customer service skills, and there's a ton of remote customer service jobs out there. You also presumably have specialist knowledge in alcohol, maybe you have a good amount of wine knowledge. I don't know, but there'll be jobs that are remote that will require that skill set, and you need to find them. Say you're a car salesman. Great, you have sales skills, and you can make a ton of money online with that. Another option is to look at your skill set and teach people those skills. I don't necessarily mean just, tutoring. You can also help courses, create content for their courses, and pass on your knowledge to the next generation. All of this can be done remotely. If you can't think of any professional skills that you can apply to remote work, just think of your skills in general. For example, you're listening to this video. You probably speak English. You can teach English. Maybe you speak another language. You can teach that. Maybe you got really good grades in biology or math at school, and you can teach that to high school students. You don't like the idea of teaching? That's absolutely fine. There's also a ton of online entry-level jobs that you can do. However, I would just be mindful with the entry-level stuff that you're obviously probably not going to be making as much as you would with a profession. You'll still probably be able to find some positions where you can make enough to live that digital nomad lifestyle, but it's going to be a lot harder. And there's also a lot of scammy stuff going out there, where they promise you the world. You can make 6 figures with an entry-level job that you can do anywhere in the world. And I would just be really mindful of them. Generally speaking, if something's too good to be true, it is. General rule of thumb is never hand over money to someone for a job or for a course that's going to help you get a job. I don't mean specialized courses where, they're going to teach you specific skills like, a Photoshop course or a coding academy. I'm talking about really vague ones where they're, trying to sell you a lifestyle essentially, rather than a career. Okay, so next I want to talk about freelancing. I personally love freelancing. I think it's really good, especially as a digital nomad, to have the freedom to pick up as much or as little work as you want. For example, maybe you're working from Thailand for a little bit. You're not going to need to make a huge amount of money. Maybe you can get away with freelancing 5 to 10 hours a week and you can still get by on that. Then other times, maybe you're going to be in Denmark or Switzerland, New York, and you're going to need to make a bit more money, in which case you can pick up more freelance work. That said, you do need to be in a position where you can pick up work. So we're going to quickly go over a few different ways that you can freelance and get started pretty much straight away. The 2 main websites that you've probably already heard of are Fiverr and Upwork. If you haven't heard of them, they're sites where as a freelancer you can sign up your services, and as an employer or a business owner you can recruit someone for their services, whether it be kind of an ongoing thing or a one-off gig. I do think these websites are great. However, if you're wanting to make enough as a freelancer to really get by and have that consistent income, you're going to have to do your research. I would first start by sussing out the competition on there, which luckily with these sites is very easy to do. I would see how much your competition is charging and how your skills compare to theirs. How much will you be able to charge for a similar service? I'd also look at how much money they have made since starting their account. Say, for example, they've made $20,000. That's great. But if they've been on there for a few years and that's all they've made, that's probably not going to be enough to be a digital nomad. Another thing to be mindful of is getting started isn't easy. It's easy to create an account and to upload your portfolio and everything like that, but most clients won't work with you unless you have a few references on that site. So even if you've had 10 years experience in your industry, if you have no references on the site that can back that up, you're going to have to start off really low, and you can gradually start increasing that price as you get more and more references. But you're looking at a few months before you can charge, what you want to charge for that. From my experience, I think Fiverr is probably better from a freelancer, but I guess it would depend on the industry. For example, I've seen a lot of things on Upwork that require a good amount of skill, and they're offering, $3 an hour, yet still having tens of applicants. So it is competitive out there, and probably not what you want to use as your main source of income. That said, if you can make it work for you, that's great. Another way you can generate business as a freelancer is by networking. And I don't just mean social media networking, although I will come back to that in a second. I mean real life, face-to-face business connections that you might have made throughout your career, friends, anyone you meet, if you're speaking to them for long enough, tell them what you do. Chances are they might need someone with your services or know someone who does. The more you put yourself out there, the more likely you are to get business. And now let's talk about social media. So depending on different industries, different social media platforms are going to get you work. I personally get a lot of my work through LinkedIn or Discord, which if you looked at my LinkedIn, you would find that very strange because for an ex-recruiter/resume builder, my LinkedIn profile is not great. Fixing it up has been on my list of things to do. Fortunately, I have been at full capacity for a while now, so I haven't had that need to really use social media to generate revenue. I have just had enough people come to me, which is always lovely. And hopefully that will start happening to you as well soon. And finally, create a website. Share it with people. You can use WordPress if you know how to code, great, code something. And if you have no idea how to do any of that stuff, well, great, you can hire someone really cheap on Upwork. Share it with your friends, social media, maybe do a bit of SEO marketing. Again, you can find someone on Upwork to do that, and just put yourself out there. Freelancing obviously has its risks. You might find you're really busy one month and less busy the next month. So if that is the path you take, you want to make sure that you've got a bit of a safety net so that if you do have a slow few months, you're not completely broke. Next, I want to talk about essential items to take with you when you're a digital nomad. Depending on your industry, you're going to need different equipment. However, I'm going to show you generally what you're probably going to need. Firstly, of course, you're going to need a phone and a laptop. I personally would recommend having 2 phones if you're able to do so. The reason being, if one gets lost, stolen, or broken, you're not completely screwed. Of course, you can always buy a new phone if that does happen, but from my experiences, that's not actually that easy to do in quite a few countries, buying a decent phone. So if you can, or if you have to, great, bring them both with you. Also with the phone, I would make sure that you've got a SIM card that works in whatever country you're in or planning on going to. You might find a good universal one that works in a few different countries. For example, I believe there's a few that work, in the whole of the EU. They could be a good option. But you could also just buy a SIM card whenever you get to a new country. They're usually, $2 and, relatively easy to get. But you do want to make sure that you don't cheap out and just get whatever's the cheapest. You need a good, stable connection to the rest of the world. If you have convinced your client or your boss that you can do just as good a job from anywhere in the world, yet you're constantly cutting out in meetings or unavailable due to lack of internet connection, it's not a good look and it's not professional. Make sure you have a good internet connection. Okay, now let's talk about laptops. You're obviously going to need a laptop to be a digital nomad, most likely. You might find some industries where it's not required, but 99.9% of the time, you're going to need a good laptop. Now, I have 2 laptops and I use them for different purposes. So this is my MacBook. It's an M1 MacBook Air. I'm not doing a sponsorship, I'm just telling you what I have. I don't think it's the latest model, but it's a few years old. And I find the MacBook is really good for me because it's got a really good battery life. So, if I'm doing things like responding to emails or admin things or writing blog posts, and I want to work from a cafe or something, it's a really good option for that. And I do love it for that reason. However, it's only 8 GB of RAM. So what I mostly work from is this beautiful piece of a thing. Again, I'm not doing any sort of promotion, so I'm not going to go into detail about the brand or anything. But this is a gaming laptop. It has GPU, so I can use it for video editing, animating, Photoshop, any graphic design kind of thing, coding, and anything that just requires that bit more power. It doesn't have great battery life and it's heavy, so it's not great for, if you're always wanting to work from a different space, but it definitely gets the job done. And as long as I've got a plug, it works. And I would of course recommend having 2 laptops if it's within your budget. Absolutely. Again, the reason being you don't want to be put out of work because you're having technical issues. However, if it's not in your budget, that's okay. There's plenty of libraries and things that you can work from as well, depending on what sort of role you have. Maybe it might not be appropriate to conduct a meeting in a library, for example, or internet cafe. I don't even know if they still have internet cafes. I'm assuming they do. What else? Another thing that Another piece of equipment that has been an absolute game changer for me is this. So this is a portable double screen. So I simply open this like that and plug this into my laptop, and then I have a dual screen monitor, which really, really increases my productivity It's the size of, I guess, a normal screen. Here's my face for scale. And yeah, I can be pretty much just as productive from this as I can from, you know, the more permanent static screens. Again, I don't really want to go into what brand or anything I'm using. I'm just saying, you know, I would definitely recommend it. It's about normal screen size, but it's super light. This one is a touchscreen. I wouldn't say touchscreen is completely necessary, but if you're used to touchscreen, maybe it is. I don't want to go into a huge amount of detail of the specs I would recommend because it will vary from laptop to laptop, but I would make sure that it is obviously compatible with whatever laptop you have and that you can turn the screen brightness up and down. That is an important one. Okay, and finally, I probably wouldn't actually say this is necessary, but this is what I have. I have a tablet as well. So this is just really good for me when I'm on a bus or plane or whatever, and I get an idea and I can just quickly jot it down without getting the whole laptop out or, you know, writing something on my phone. In fact, I've got notes of what to cover in this video on here, right there. So that's a good example of how I use it. However, I would say the other things are definitely a lot more important. This is just a fun extra. And then obviously you're going to need whatever equipment is relevant to your role, and I'll let you figure out what that is. Wonderful. So we have talked about the actual working side of things. Now I want to get into more of the travel side of things. Obviously, most countries are a lot more expensive than they were a few years ago due to inflation. But that's okay. You can still travel really cheap or even free in some circumstances. My first travel tip would be to travel when possible during low season. For example, say you want to go to the Mediterranean for the summer or Sydney for New Year's Eve. You're going to be paying a ton of money just to travel during that time. You're also going to find shortages of accommodation and a lot fewer options. So when you have the flexibility to work from wherever in the world, travel during low season. Travel outside of the school holidays. I'd also always look into kind of the cheapest option for you to get from point A to B. Rome to Rio is a good site that I've found. It lists, you know, a few different ways you can get to a place and the price of each option. In terms of accommodation, there's a few ways that you can get free or very cheap accommodation. Obviously, to get cheap accommodation, things like hostels and homestays are usually the cheapest options, usually. If you are staying in a hostel or something, you might also want to look into co-working space when you're doing that, so you get, you know, more of a professional environment when you are trying to work. And there's a lot of cheap co-working spaces all over the world. In fact, I'm pretty sure almost every city would have a co-working space that you can rent out by the hour, by the day, week, month, year, whatever. If you're really flexible with where you want to be at what time, house sitting is a really good option to do that. I use Trusted House Sitters. They're really good. So you pay an annual membership. I think it's like $200, $300, and you can apply for as many house sitting opportunities as you want. You don't get paid to house sit, but you get free accommodation for the whole time you're there. So, you know, it could be a long weekend, could be a month. Either way, you can stay in some pretty good places for free. There's a few different ones out there, but from my understanding, this one actually gives you kind of a guarantee. So if the owner cancels on you last minute, they'll actually give you money towards finding last minute accommodation, which is really cool. I haven't looked into a huge amount of others, so I can't really compare them, but that's what I'm using, and it's great. Another way that you can stay in accommodation for free is using couchsurfing.com. You might have heard of it already. It's essentially people will put their couches or spare room on this site and you can stay with them for free. And the kind of advantages to hosting on Couchsurfing is that you can meet and network with people from all over the world. You know, for example, when you have friends stay with you from a different country, you find that you get out and explore your area a lot more. And that's a big reason why people host to Couchsurfers, so that they can, you know, meet new people and explore, you know, their hometown. And being a couch surfer is fun as well, because you get to stay with people who live in that area and know the area quite well, and it's free to use as well. The only thing with doing this as a digital nomad is obviously you have to work as well. And sometimes on couch surfing, you might feel a bit awkward about staying at someone's place and then just working a 12-hour day. And they obviously might not be keen to host someone who's just going to do that. So it's not always appropriate all of the time. However, if you do want to get started, I would recommend before you start your journey to put yourself on there and host some people now. Because if you have already got references and you can show that you've hosted yourself, you're more likely to get picked by hosts to stay with them for free. Another thing you can do, and this is better if you aren't working full-time, if you're just doing, part-time stuff or a few projects here and there, is workaway. And workaway is basically where you work in exchange for accommodation and usually sometimes food as well. So, usually you're expected to work 3 to 5 hours a day in exchange for that. So, if you're only freelancing a couple hours a week, it's a nice option to get out, explore, again, stay with locals, and learn new skills as well. I would, however, be mindful, a lot of the work is, on farms, in pretty remote areas and things like that. You do need to make sure that you can get internet and have that stable connection if you plan on working on top of your, workaway duties. Some other options, and this is for free travel and accommodation, is there are plenty of campervan relocation sites across the world. So the idea behind this is, say you rent a caravan and you go from, for example, Sydney to Melbourne. Someone needs to get that caravan back up to Sydney so the next person can do that same route. Sometimes companies will offer you either discounted rates or free fuel reimbursement and caravan rental to get it from A to B during certain times. And this is a great way to explore for free. Again, you just need to make sure that wherever you're stopping on your route, you can get internet. And finally, just use your personal connections to see if you can get accommodation sorted. Maybe you might know someone who has a friend who rents out a room to travelers or students or whatever, and they might be more than happy to rent that room out to you cheaply for a few months, and it'll work out way cheaper than staying in a hotel or something. In fact, I've been doing this for a while. I very, very rarely ever stay in hotels. I'll usually stay in a hotel if I'm doing, an overnight stop somewhere or something like that, but I almost never use hotels. And that brings us to the last part of this video, where I just want to give you some final tips and tricks, do's and don'ts that will help you along your journey as well. So number one, I would avoid any get-rich-quick schemes, pyramid schemes, anything like that. I might annoy a few people by saying this, but like I said, if it's too good to be true, it usually is. Anything that you're going to have to pay money for upfront probably isn't going to get you to where you need to be. I have met hundreds of digital nomads from all parts of the world in different professions, and none of them made it happen by doing that. I'm not saying that people don't, but it's rare. It's very rare. And I'd also be quite critical of what you see on social media. You always see these posts of, these beautiful people by a poolside or on a beach with a picture of their laptop, hashtag digital nomad. And yeah, maybe they're legitimate. Or maybe it's all fake and it's marketing. As someone who has been doing this for a while, let me tell you, I very rarely work from a laptop on a poolside on a beach while sipping a mojito. You need concentration, just as you would if you were working in an office. That said, I have done it on occasion, of course. Another piece of advice is that I would stay connected with other digital nomads, other like-minded people. There are so many out there. There's loads of groups that you can join. There's loads of meetups that happen in every city. If you get the chance to work in co-working space, I would do that. A lot of co-working spaces I've found puts on social events after so that you can network and stay connected with other digital nomads. Obviously, when you are a digital nomad, you don't have your normal support group, your close family and friends, you're, a nomad. So it's really important to still socialize and put yourself out there. Otherwise, it can be a lonely journey. But if you do put yourself out there, it's a fun journey and you will meet people that you would have never normally met before. And it's amazing. I love it. I understand that I am in a privileged position with my passports in that it is quite easy for me to travel the world. However, I know not all countries like that, and a lot of countries you're going to need a visa to get into most countries. I will list in the description below a few countries that offer visas that are suitable for digital nomads so that you can apply for said visas. And I guess my advice would be to stay motivated. If you're starting this journey right now, you're going to hit roadblocks and you need to just keep going because I promise you it is worth it. And once you've become a digital nomad and you're living the dream, still continuously upskill. At the moment, we are in a candidate-driven market, which is great for digital nomads. For example, employers are a lot more likely to accommodate what we want. In addition, a lot of people are outsourcing their work to freelancers because they don't have the staff or the capacity to do it themselves. However, if we switch back to an employer-led market, there may be a few less opportunities out there. And the wider skill set you have, the more diverse you can be, and the more opportunities will be open to you. Just as you can work from anywhere in the world, you can study from anywhere in the world, so there's no reason why you can't keep upskilling and keep broadening your future horizons. Thank you for watching. This video was recorded in Portugal, where I am living that digital nomad dream. Do you have any advice for aspiring digital nomads, or do you have any issues that you've come across as a digital nomad? Are you unsure how your skill set can transition into a digital nomad career? Please let me know in the comments below. If you like this video, please subscribe. If it's popular, I'll do a few more on this. But if not, well, I hope I can help at least one person with the advice I've given today. Thank you for watching, and I wish you the best of luck on your future adventures.